This is Block 8, Pax Americana, Section 6, Seeds of the Civil Rights Movement, with the section beginning with sit-ins. Another seminal moment in the history of American race relations took place at the very end of the 1950s. On February the 1st, 1960, 4 black college freshmen in North Carolina went to their local Woolworths, sat down at the counter that said whites only, and demanded service. The black waitress that was on duty refused to serve them, saying that it was blacks like them that made the entire black race look bad. But these 4 college freshmen did not care. They had wanted to do something like this for a long time. And so what they decided to do, if they weren't going to get served at this lunch counter, they would just simply sit there without being served. And they sat there all day, calmly, politely, determinedly. The next day they came back with 19 more friends, and the 23 of them sat at the counter, just sitting there, refusing to be served. By the end of the week, they were joined by 1,000 black protesters simply crowding into the Woolworths, peacefully sitting in, on, and around the lunch counter. This movement that became known as the sit-in movement spread like wildfire across the South. All of a sudden, the sit-in at the Woolworths lunch counter was being copied in businesses, at stores, at restaurants throughout the South. Black citizens would come in and would simply sit there for hours at a time, imperiling businesses and other organizations. That if the Woolworths can't serve people food at the lunch counter, Woolworths loses a lot of money, and Woolworths doesn't like to lose a lot of money. Black citizens are taking it into their own hands to demand the rights which, by God, they deserve, and that should be theirs. And it's peaceful. You can't make the argument that these are blacks out to overthrow the country. You can't make the argument that they're causing social disorder. They're just sitting at a lunch counter, sitting in a movie theater, sitting at hundreds and then thousands of businesses across the American South. Their quiet dignity helped change the minds of millions of whites in the North and lots of whites in the South as well. 2 months after the original sit-in, the movement became formally organized when Southern black college students founded the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, and it would become to be called SNCC. And SNCC gave a structure, an organization, and a voice to all of these sit-ins happening around the South. Unlike the NAACP, and even unlike the SCLC, SNCC is young, impassioned, not based on legalisms like the NAACP, not based on the churches like King's SCLC, and SNCC is going to, very quickly as the 1960s began, they're going to leave behind the calm of the NAACP. They're going to leave behind the evolutionary tactics of Martin Luther King, and they are going to argue for more direct, radical action. As you can see, throughout the 1950s, again, a decade that is usually seen as boring, bland, conformist, and dull, was anything but. Workforce changes are happening in the North, changes in gender roles are happening throughout the country, and most importantly of all, after 100 years of Jim Crowism, or 80 years of Jim Crowism in the South, when the promises of the Civil War were not fulfilled, and for 4 or 5 generations, American blacks were forced to live under this soul-sucking system of legal segregation and culturally imposed racial inequality. In the 1940s and 50s, black Americans and their white, liberally minded allies are beginning to move the United States away from its segregated past towards a more racially equal existence. And this all happens from Jackie Robinson to the desegregation of the armed forces to Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King, the sit-in movement. you can see that history is trending in a very particular direction. And that direction is in the direction of legal equality for the 15 million American blacks, the descendants of the 4 million slaves. Their rights are going to be fought for and are soon going to be protected. It is one of the glories of American history that this awful regime of segregation is at first threatened and then cracked and then finally overthrown. And it starts in Eisenhower's America in the 1950s.